What's going on, everybody? I'm Anthony DeiCicchi with On the Water, and this is another installment of our Offshore Report brought to you by SiriusXM. Jimmy, what have you been hearing to the south?
So the big news this week is word kind of got out on those Jersey inshore bluefin. So we've been talking about probably for the last 2 or 3 weeks. When we first started hearing of them, they were 15 to 30 miles out. Then they'd come as close as 4 miles out. And it seems like those fish have settled in over some lumps and bumps and some structures there, feeding on squid. So what boats have been doing over the past week is going out there at first light, before first light, jigging up a whole bunch of live squid, and they've been catching the tuna on squid. But as the word got out and more boats got on it, I heard that it's been some really crowded conditions, which has made for some tougher fishing. So when those fish first showed up, when guys were finding them, there weren't quite as many boats on it. There were good topwater feeds. They were catching them on poppers, on plastic paddle tails, and stick baits. But with more boats, it's become more of a live bait bite. One interesting thing about it, Cheech, is that you don't have to get up at first light to get on them. I've heard there's been an afternoon bite. I've seen some posts on Instagram where guys are kind of leaving, taking kind of a gentleman's hours trip.
A little bit of gentleman fishing going on down off of the Jersey coast. I like it.
Some twilight tuna. The better canyon fishing happening right now is off southern New Jersey in those canyons from, let's say the Wilmington down to Norfolk Canyon off Virginia. And the Cape May fleet's been on a good bite of yellowfin. There's big eye tuna there, and there's billfish. The bill fishing seems to be pretty good in the southern canyons right now, which is a way different story than we're hearing in the New England canyons. I know you're on a little Intel cartel.
Yeah, it's been really, really dead. Atlantis, West Atlantis, East Atlantis. It's been very quiet. All the Atlantis just ghost town.
And
Beach has been super quiet. I haven't gotten anything from like Hydro or Ocean recently, but it's been real quiet. Like I was getting kind of live feed report from somebody that was out there literally today, and it was like the news was some guy just picked up 2 at Beach, and they were both rat yellowfin. So very quiet in our local canyons from Atlantis north. Have you heard anything on the Hudson, Jimmy?
I did not. I haven't really looked in that range yet. Most of what I heard, like I said, was from the south.
Yeah.
So a little bit of a quiet spell, like a dead spot in the middle of the canyon season. It's not unusual to have one this time of year.
We know that from firsthand experience.
Last year, this exact week, the first week of August, we were out in Veach Canyon.
Tile fishing and Mahi fishing and ogling at whale shark. That was basically our trip.
That was all we did, 36 hours, and it was just flat, hot water everywhere you went, no breaks. And usually a storm or something or some weather churns things up, gets the bite back on, creates some more edges in there for the fish to feed along and concentrate the bait. So it's not unusual for these canyons to kind of hit a little bit of a slow spot this time of year. We nailed it last year.
Oh, we hit it perfect. We ended a 17-trip, multi-year swordfish streak for Captain Larry Backman. Which is just par for the course for when Jimmy and Cheech get together, well, unfortunately.
At least we get to go out and do it all again Sunday. But Larry Backman, speaking of him, he did get a daytime swordfish this past week on a canyon trip. So they are out there, even though the tuna fishing's a little bit slower in the canyons.
Yep.
The swordfish are there, and they're swimming 1,800 feet down. They're kind of operating on a different system than everything else, but they are following the bait.
Swimming and eating. That's all those dumpsters do.
So even though the tuna fishing in the canyons in New England is slow, that southern New England bluefin tuna, yellowfin tuna bite on the midshore structures is excellent right now. That continues to be good. It's been about a month straight of that.
Keep it going. Let's just keep it going.
So, you gonna add anything?
Yeah.
You're just hyping it up.
I'm hyping it up because I hope to be in all of the tuna glory in the Midshore grounds on Sunday. Jimmy and I have a trip planned with...
Absolutely jinxing us.
What is your problem? Can you ever be optimistic? Like, let's go out and slay. Let's go out and do the dishes, as you say, Jim. I love that line, by the way.
So yeah, that's a Captain Rob Radliff line. So when you're jigging and you're just constantly fishing, you're doing the dishes. I do love that. Captain Robbie Radliff has been fishing out in New Jersey. I know he's He's put a couple giants away this summer. There's a good giant bite, or a fairly reliable giant bite happening from, let's say, New Jersey, Long Island, Montauk. There's giants around Block Island. There's giants east of Cape Cod. And there's giants, you heard about some up on the Middle Bank.
Yeah, so there's been commercial fish basically throughout Stellwagen, and, you know, basically all the way Gloucester and up to basically the Canadian border, throughout the main grounds. It's been all commercial fish, which is why we haven't really hit on that too much, because there hasn't been any rec-size bluefin that anybody has talked about up that way. So it's been all giants. I heard Middle Bank was really good last week on giants. Making bait was a tough deal. I'm sure those guys would love to have that, you know, opportunity to catch live squid like you heard off that jersey. That's one of my favorite tuna baits is a live squid. But making bait had been tough at times throughout the bank area, but there's plenty of commercial fish up that way. Heading out east of Chatham and those grounds, it's been a little bit of a further ride to the fish, but it seems like that jig bite with a mix of wreck to giant sized fish have been willing to play ball.
And there were some more topwater feeds this week too. Guys went out there and got out east and found tuna feeding on top once again. And that had kind of slowed down, I'd say, by mid-July, but it seems like that's picking back up. So you have a mix of fish on top, fish on the jig. So the bite out east of Cape Cod's looking good. The bite south of Cape Cod off Block Island and, you know, east of Montauk, that whole area there is just still great. There's a jig bite for bluefin, and we heard of more yellowfin on poppers this week. I know a few of your buddies got out there and they popped some yellowfin. What do you know about popping yellowfin? I've never caught a tuna on a popper. I'm dying to do it.
I know this, that whenever I throw a popper into a feed, the tuna just laugh. I don't know why. Like my last trip, I had, you know, I don't know, 100 yards of feeding yellowfin coming from all directions, and I pulled my popper right through it, and they didn't touch it. I was hoping to follow hook when it. That's how bad it got. I don't know why. I just haven't been able to pop one. But the guys that have been popping them, you know, I'm starting to kind of pay attention to the little tips and tricks, because obviously what I'm doing isn't working. I haven't really tried popping a tuna for more than a couple trips, but when they mark fish and they're drifting and jigging, if they mark fish in the 50-foot range and above, they'll just blind cast a popper and work it back to the boat, and that's been getting bit, which is something that hopefully we can give a go this next trip.
Always have that popper rod rigged and ready when you're jigging, and man, that'd be very cool.
What poppers do you like, Jim?
Man, well, you're asking somebody who's never caught one on there, but just going by what the guys who do well on it, I know Joe DiOrio said he likes the Halco Rusta popper in about a 6-inch size. The Mad Mantis 6-inch one is kind of a classic. Rapala makes a really cool big game popper in a 5-inch size. And
I like how those fish, the Rapalas.
The one common thread seems to be those poppers that are like a Gibbs Polaris popper, where you have a little neck popper, like as the striper guys know them, Polaris poppers or the Super Strike little neck popper. So you have a big mouth, narrows down to a smaller neck, and then flares out in the back of the body. And the idea behind that type of popper is that it casts well, and it throws a ton of water, which is important if you are trying to get a fish to come up 50 feet to eat it. Throw a lot of water, and then a longer pause than you'd think.
Yeah,
that's the information. That's the advice I've been given with popping tuna, and hopefully we can, like you said, we can put that to use.
The one that I launched in that feed was a green Mad Mantis. I do know that. The best name for a popper by far is one made by Nomad, which is the Chug Norris. I do want to try that just because it's got an awesome name. It fits the mold of that style popper. So a little tidbit for you there, Jim.
So while we've had good water for Mahi, like the water temperatures are right, you've got a lot of, that clean, blue, warm water that's inside of the canyons. One of the struggles guys have been talking about in terms of finding them is not a lot of structure out there. There's not a lot of gear. At least that's what I've been hearing south of the vineyard. Stavros Viglis from Martha's Vineyard, he is always out there on the tuna grounds. He said the Mahi fishing isn't as good as it tends to be just because there's less gear. So there's less of those floating structures to cast to that concentrate them. Now, when you were out there, you said the Mahi were just kind of free swimming out there. If you drifted long enough, they would find the boat.
Yeah, we would basically drift in, repeated drifts in the same, I don't know, it wasn't a fast drift, 1,000-yard drifts pretty much, and I looked down and saw some color, and I'm like, oh, school of Mahi right there. Unfortunately, we didn't have anything on board that a Mahi would even consider eating. We were really just focused on jigging and popping, tuna with some trolling gear as a fallback, but they were nice sized Mahi too, which they weren't little tiny ones. They were like,
we did hear about
size.
some really big Mahi out in the canyons last week during the Tri-State Canyon Shootout off Block Island, and I know one boat, I think it was the Gypsy, I could be wrong, forgive me if it's not the Gypsy, but one of the boats said they lost a 50-pound class Mahi right at the boat, and they had some video of it because Sport Fishing Championship, which is they're kind of like the NASCAR of offshore fishing, where they cover all these tournaments and kind of
the Bassmaster Classic, if you will, of offshore fishing coverage, because it's a similar kind of coverage.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
It's better than NASCAR, Jim. Sorry, just keep it in the family.
No, it feels more like NASCAR. They hired like a NASCAR announcer.
You're right.
To do
It does.
But anyhow, they had video of that Mahi being lost right next to the boat, and it was mammoth. But most of the Mahi you're going to see, especially inside the canyons, are going to be less than 10 pounds. A lot of fun on Albie or striper gear. And even when they come real close, when you get the warm waters, it keeps drifting inshore, especially, we're coming up on the time of year, late August, early September, when our waters are at their absolute warmest that time of year. That's when you're going to have the shortest run to catch Mahi. I mean, sometimes up here on the Cape, you'll see them at the Hooter, which is a structure just south of Martha's Vineyard. In New Jersey, they're within 5 miles of the inlets. I remember I was on a party boat one time, drifting a reef like 3 miles from shore, and one guy caught 2 mahi. But they tend to be small, great light tackle size, a lot of fun.
I was togging along the Elizabeth last year. I think it must have been October. It had to have been. I'm usually not togging any earlier than that. And
is that when Coombs got one?
Yeah, little peanut Mahi. We're like jumping around the pots, like little tiny ones. That's crazy. Cool.
Brian Coombs got one along the Elizabeth
Islands.
Yeah,
he got them on epoxy jigs. They were a little bigger than that, but they were still real small. He actually was out, he was south earlier this week, I think on Tuesday, and chafed off a nice bluefin, and basically had a yellowfin crash top water, and that one shook off too. But he got into some Mahi, but he said they were very small.
Yeah, that midshore yellowfin bite is good. Also off the south shore of Long Island, so it is, you kind of have it in that same range. It seems like it might be drifting west a little bit, which is what it did this around this time last year. You had the great yellowfin bite happening around Block Island. It moved west, and then it settled into Hudson Canyon in late September, early October. Mm-hmm. And that was just, I mean, guys are going to be talking about the fishing they had last year, the chunk bite, where it was go out, boat limits of yellowfin, hand feeding them. And I missed it last year. If that happens this year, I'm going to be looking for an open boat, or if maybe just stealing Chris Megan's regulator and driving all the way to Hudson Canyon myself. But as of right now, you've got a good shot at midshore bluefin, good shot at midshore yellowfin. In New England, canyon's definitely a little bit slower, but fortunately you don't have to run that far to find a tuna. Down south, off New Jersey, Cape May, hit the canyons. And if you, anytime you're going to the canyons, bring some tile fishing gear too. That is, to me, that's a more interesting consolation prize than the Mahi.
Yeah.
Because one, they're bigger, they tend to be bigger on average. And you never know what you're going to pull up. So guys have been kind of making the most of their canyon trips when it's a little bit slower by making some deep drops for tile fish up on the flats. But now, as we've been doing every week, Cheech is going to read a couple of his favorite Facebook reports.
Yeah, I got a little two-part special. The first one's a question. And I got a question for you, Jim. How's your blood pressure been, Jim?
Yeah, so thank you for everybody who's been watching these reports and the commenters, even the guy that said we are the picture of high blood pressure. And, if you had the 2 tuna trips we had last week, you'd have high blood pressure too. So
this one is, these both come from Northeast Offshore Pelagic Reports group on Facebook. Charles Cavallo asks a question. I don't get offshore for pelagics, but 2 to 4 times a year for overnighters. I fish a ton otherwise, but not having an offshore boat pins me to charters. My question which is on topic, is about any pointers on exercises for strength for fighting large pelagics. I'm already active and work out 4 times a week or so. No stranger to catching large fish, but I'd love to really dial it in and make the most of my limited time out there. Thanks in advance. And he's got a nice picture of laying on the deck, covered in blood and with a big tuna.
What workouts do you do to prepare for tuna? How do you achieve this level of fitness?
0 to 0 times a week, I get a good workout in, and it's
Just plenty of 12 and 16 ounce curls.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even do those, Jim. I'm more of a, like this guy seems to want to be, in marathon runner shape for his offshore pursuits. I'm more of a heavyweight, title fighter. I'll give you 12 rounds at 3 minutes of everything I have. That's how I get down.
I've been out there. I've been the one doing like the 15-minute rounds in between your 3-minute rounds. That's not true. But we actually.
It all depends on what you hook. But go into the actual report side of things.
No, that's an interesting point because somebody did. I posted the comment about the high blood pressure on my Instagram account. And somebody said, "Well, like, what is a good workout for tuna fishing?" I'm like, I have no idea. I really don't know if there even is one.
You see those reels where guys are using the rowing machine, like they're like pulling on a fish. I don't know.
Probably just being in good physical shape and not even working out specifically for tuna, but just not like, I don't know, doing something.
Something is better than this. So we'll have to work on that, Jim. We'll have to employ the buddy system. You have to bring accountability into that type of deal so that you can change your lifestyle.
Let's reel this in.
So the next one the last one I want to cover is from Anthony Girardi. He says, "So I want to pass on a positive from yesterday, fishing south of Block Island. It seems, during the week at least, people are finally starting to get it when jigging and popping whales for tuna. Yesterday was a great whale feed day. They were staying put and gorging themselves on massive bait balls, lazy, fat, and happy. All the boats on the jig and pop. 1, gave them space. 2, when moving with them, no one I saw raced around. Everyone moved slow and quiet without crowding or running up on them. 3, most of the guys trolling understand to troll around the outside of the boat's jigging, the perimeter of the feed. That is where the troll bite will be. All of this keeps the whales up and the tuna up if they are there, instead of driving them down and scattering them. That's how you roll. Hats off to the boats I was fishing around." That's from Anthony on the Karen B.
That's a positive. You hear a lot of complaints, but you never hear. Nobody ever wants to go and praise everybody. But that's nice to hear. That's a good.
Yeah, I loved it. It really does a great job of breaking down how to fish, with each other instead of kind of ruining it for everybody else. It's if you haven't done a lot of offshore fishing, watch what's going on out there. Watch the boats that seem to be, tight or dialed in, and try not to be that oddball that's racing around and kind of ruining the party for everybody else. It's good etiquette to follow instruction like that.
When the bite's been good for a while in an area that's easily accessible, you're going to deal with these crowds. So being able to manage that and get everybody working together, you're all going to catch more fish that way. I was talking with Rob Radliff from Jersey today, and he said about those crowds on the Bluefin grounds. He said he went out there the other day, and it looked like a small city over the spot. He said, but what a lot of these guys don't realize is they're going right to the numbers wherever their buddies had hooked them. And he said if they just slow down approaching that, he said, you'll see the singles, you'll see marks well away from the fleet. He says, especially if you're drifting bait, there's been a lot of live squid the guys are catching and then drifting. He goes, you don't need to be right in the fleet on top of everybody. He said, if you're drifting outside that, they'll find you. So that's another piece of advice is that's something that Rob is great at, and hunting. Like if he sees the fleet, he's looking for tuna chicks, he's looking for slicks, any signs of tuna, and he does, that aren't just a pile of boats somewhere. So knowing what you want to look for can help you find your own little pile of fish without dealing with big crowds. Thanks for watching another Northeast Offshore Report from On the Water presented by SiriusXM. Catch us next Friday with another one and with some, we actually didn't get out of since the last one, We will have some fresh intel next week, and hopefully it's good news. So
let's hope. Have a great weekend, everybody, and good luck on the offshore grounds. Catch them up.